I'm Mike Hall, the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation, and through our missions and programs, we support the Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life program by providing experience, guidance, and vetted resources for current and veteran Rangers and their families. We support the Ranger for Life program by providing benchmark transition assistance. We understand that transition is a lifelong event that starts at enlistment. We maintain transition counselors at each of the Ranger battalions, offering timely and personalized support in the regiment's Big Five of transition, which are mentorship and networking, education, financial wellness, VA benefits, and holistic fitness and wellness to active duty as well as Ranger veterans. Central to our approach is an extensive mentorship program, leveraging a network of probably 10,000 formal and informal former members of the 75th Ranger Regiment who provide unvarnished experience and access to their networks. They know what success looks like. These meaningful relationships allow both mentors and mentees to stay connected to the Ranger community and benefit from shared experiences and guidance. Today, we're going to hear from Ranger Network mentors and attorneys Samuel Parent and Travis West. Sam, Travis, it's always great to catch up with you too. Thanks for all you do giving back, for being on here, and the Rangers you have helped over the years. Why don't we start with each of you telling us a little bit about your military and post-military background? Sam, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Mike. So I'm actually a second generation Ranger. My father served in 275, and my older brother was also a 175 guy. We both served in Charlie Company 175. I got out as a team leader in 2017. After getting out, I worked as a special programs contractor for a little bit, like hanging out in places that don't exist and working on my graduate degree. I finished that up at University of Alabama. Roll Tide. And from there, I classed up at Stetson Law School in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm currently studying for the July 2025 bar exam. In the short time I've had in the legal community, I've had the opportunity to work for the Department of Justice in their Major Crimes Division in the Middle District of Tampa. I've worked for the Public Defender's Office in Clearwater and also the Sixth Circuit Prosecutor's Office. I've been lucky to take about 10 trials to verdict working as a CLI, and I currently work in a JD Advantage position business role as an operations manager for a local real estate venture company. Plan to return to trial work very soon in the future.
Oh, Mike, I think we lost you on mute, but I'm guessing you're asking me to jump in.
Yeah, I am. I was just saying, you're lucky to spend all that time in 175, and I know you're not jealous or anything, Travis. But why don't you go ahead?
I took a little bit more circuitous route. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 1998. I spent starting in college and then after college about 5 years working in politics and government. I decided somewhere in the middle of my fifth year that working as a Senate staffer wasn't the glamorous life that I thought it was going to be, and I Forrest Gumped my way into the Ranger Regiment from there. I managed to land at 375, where I got to spend, I think I landed there in March of '01 and stayed there until the summer of '04, where I got to spend some summer vacations in both Iraq and Afghanistan. When I got out, it was primarily for family reasons. My wife and I were in the process of starting a family. She had been offered a great gig with her former tech company that had been bought up by a gigantic tech company by that point. And so we moved back to Wisconsin, and I had to figure out what to do with my life. And the skill set that we had, the hard skill set that we had as Rangers, didn't necessarily apply in the city of Madison, Wisconsin. And so I ended up at the University of Wisconsin Law School, taking advantage of some of the skills that I had developed as an undergrad in political science, combining it with some of the leadership skills that I developed in the military, and then parlayed that into a law degree that eventually turned into working as a litigator at what is now one of the biggest firms in the Midwest. So I worked in the world almost exclusively of commercial litigation, product liability litigation, and intellectual property litigation for the first 4 or 5 years of my career. over time, I decided that I wanted to expand my legal practice in order to start being able to give back to the communities that I thought were important. And so I developed a veterans disability benefits practice. Now I'm about 20 years down the road, and I own a small firm that's based. The headquarters is based in southern Wisconsin, but we, in addition to our traditional legal services work, which covers the gamut from litigation through estate planning, through transactional work, through just about everything else you can imagine. We also provide one of the most comprehensive veterans disability benefits practices in the upper Midwest. So that's been very rewarding, and I've been grateful for the opportunity. And at this point in my career, I still litigate a little bit, and I still get involved in some of the disability benefits stuff, but I spend most of my day managing the firm and trying to herd lawyers, which is a lot like herding cats.
Well, thanks. So, I think one thing that's significant is, of course, you were both in the Army and you were Army Ranger infantry guys, and I know of about we probably got 30, 35 guys in the network that are attorneys now, to help them give back rangers. I know, Travis, your network is much bigger, but it's, of course, the majority of guys did not that are in the network, we're not attorneys when they're in the Army, and again, most of them are infantry guys, except probably Rick Welch, but Rick's a little weird anyway, so that would explain it. Rick's very successful also. Yeah, but you two are good examples of General Lazinski used to say, you give five Rangers a tank and give them 2 weeks and they'll be the best tank crew in the world, and you two are good examples of whatever you set your mind to, you can be successful. And a lot of guys transition, they worry about that. We continue to tell them, and we all had the same anxiety, but the things that you learn in regiment, whether it's time management and leadership and people skills, you can't, you really don't have a book, but that stuff is ingrained in you. It's going to make you very, very successful after you get out. Travis, let's start with you since you're the elder ranger, I'd say.
Sure.
But why and when did you decide to become an attorney? And what do you attribute your success on getting into a good law school? I mean, why did you choose that school? And how did you choose your particular path, not only to be an attorney, but the path as an attorney that you took?
Sure. So I touched on this a little bit before, but I ended up at the University of Wisconsin Law School. One, because it was my undergrad. Two, because it was the job where my wife, the city where my wife had a job. Um, UW is sort of a mid first tier school, and so I knew that I was going to get a good education there. Wisconsin, one of the benefits to going to one of the two law schools that are in Wisconsin is it's the last state in the country that has the bar privilege. And so I was excited to not have to take the bar, which was great.
Wow.
And then I knew that if I wasn't able to get in, that I would have Marquette as a backup. So Marquette is either, if I remember right, it's a low tier 2 or high tier 3 school. If you're going to graduate and work in sort of the upper Midwest, it's still a very well-respected school, but it's a little bit easier to get into than the UW is. So that's why I picked it. My path to getting there, I knew that I was going to be getting out at some point during my near the end of my last deployment to Iraq, and so I started studying for the LSAT while I was overseas with the plan of taking it once I returned. Um, I It may be different now, but in those days, the LSAT was such a substantial part of how and why you got in, especially for non-traditional students like me that weren't coming directly from an undergraduate program. So that was a very important part. I started studying overseas, then I took a course when I got home through, I think it was through Princeton Review. And even then, I got waitlisted to get in. And this is something that I talk to a lot of law students that work for, excuse me, a lot of college students that ask me about advice for going to law school. If there's a school that you want to get into particularly and you get waitlisted, don't do the Ranger thing. Don't just sit there and hope that they let you through the wait list. Figure out who that dean of admissions is, show up at his or her door, phone calls, emails, ask a lot of questions of the admissions office about what can I do to be more competitive. be the squeaky wheel, call and ask, hey, where am I in the process? Am I getting close to the top? Those types of things will speak volumes to a lot of schools about, hey, this is somebody who has an interest in being here. They're going to be a good they're going to be a good addition to the class that's coming in. They have something to offer. They're not just a wallflower. And so I did that. I flew from Georgia back to Wisconsin, and I met with the admissions dean, and 48 hours later, I was admitted to that class. So once I got into law school, I had initially come in thinking that I was going to go into criminal defense or prosecution. I come from a family of cops, and then I quickly realized that although trial work is rewarding, there isn't a lot of money in the criminal defense world, and even less in the prosecution world, often because you're on a government salary. And so I know I still wanted to litigate, but I looked at other options, and I ended up in the commercial litigation sector primarily. And um, part of that decision was made by going through the on-campus interview process and taking a look at what are the firms that I can get jobs at that will offer me the salary that I need in order for my family to be comfortable, the type of work that I want to do, and the cultural fit that I think is a good fit for my personality. And those factors all sort of drove the decision to go with the firm that I eventually landed with. And I sort of attribute the ability to think forward about where I'm going to land to a lot of the skill sets that we developed in the service. Uh, you might come in as a private where you're just a sponge and you're absorbing, but by the time that you make team leader, you need to be thinking 3 or 4 steps down the road in order to make sure that your team has some success. And I really just took that and applied that in the civilian world after I got out.
Hey, yeah, it's great advice. You touched on a couple things that are common through transitioning Rangers and Ranger veterans that want to change stuff is, one of the first things we try to tell guys is figure out where you want to live and figure out what you want to do. It sounds so simplistic, and it says, oh, it doesn't apply to me, but in a lot of ways it really does. I mean, you had some goals, and but where you wanted to live was a big part of that. You touched on, and you both do so much giving back to the Ranger community. I mean, Travis has been involved in just about all the Ranger organizations and spent a ton of time. Sam and a buddy of his are putting together a document for Rangers, on the ins and outs and how to be successful, figuring out the right MBA to get into. But, waitlist will come up with a lot of guys. And what you said, I've heard that a million times. And that's what we tell guys. Oh, I got accepted 6 of the 7, but the one I really want to get into is I'm waitlisted. And I said, well, call your Ranger buddies and let's say it's Duke, call your Ranger buddies that we linked you up with at Duke and have them look over your stuff one more time and say, hey, go back to the college, tell them this, tell them that, reiterate this. You'd be surprised, how impressed they can sometimes be with somebody going in there and doing that. And another thing that you touched on is everybody wants to find a purpose, but a lot of people get out and they're looking for a job, and that a job equals money, but it's a balance between money, the culture of what you want to do, and how it fits in your family life. And I think sometimes guys can get carried away with that dollar sign and not realize how it affects those other two pillars. And mostly because most Rangers are terrible communicators, and we don't sit down with our family and really figure that out. So.
We have spent we as a firm have spent a lot of time uh, coaching law students and young associates that we've managed to coach from other firms on that very issue. You can make a ton of money as an attorney. AM 100 firms, AM 200 firms pay ridiculous salaries to kids who are right out of law school and they don't even know anything yet. But you are sacrificing a lot of your time in order to do that. The minimum billables at some of the bigger firms that will pay those salaries 2,000 hours a year, 2,200 hours a year, some places 2,400 hours a year. And that may not sound like a lot of time as as you're sitting here thinking about it as well. There's a lot more than 2,400 hours in a given year. I can easily do that. But when you start adding up what it takes to record those number of billable hours, you sacrifice almost all of the time that you have available with family, with friends, with your hobbies, with your personal interests. You're essentially committing to, for that portion of your career, you're going to live at the office from about 7 a.m. until 8 to 10 at night. You'll go home and sleep and get up the next morning and do it all over again. So you have to really think about, is the money the most important part, or are there other aspects that are, that are important as well? You can still make a great living at a mid-sized firm doing other practice areas. I made light a little bit about how the criminal defense world doesn't pay as well as the civil world. You can still make good money doing criminal defense if that's your thing. So you have to prioritize what's the most important aspect to you. um, and that goes, Sam may touch on this in a little bit. That's true not only for what firm you want to work for when you get out, but even in selecting which school you want to go to, because they all have different reasons why you might pick one versus another.
Yeah. Sam, to you now, and you're basically still going through the process, and Travis touched on some things, but going through the process, you feel some of the, I call the pain points of going through the process. So, anything to update or to say differently than Travis, and of course we want to hear different opinions if you have, but also address why do you think Rangers should consider law school or being an attorney, or and what characteristics you think make Rangers suitable as attorneys, and anything else you'd like to touch on that maybe Travis did.
Absolutely. And Mike, honestly, I think that this format is excellent. To have a guy that's at the beginning of the legal career, and then have a guy that's kind of, got that experience. I think it's excellent, an excellent format to answer these questions from those two different sides. I have to echo a lot of what Travis said, is that it really, your choice of law school really is determinative of what you think you want going forward. And you can achieve the same goals by maybe not going to a T10 school. That becomes less important based on what you want. Like in my experience, I knew that I wanted to be a trial attorney. I saw Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So I looked up what was the number one school, and similar to Travis, I was forward deployed to Africa as a contractor, and I was like, well, I think I need something that's a little bit more stable, something I'm going to be able to do, li- longer in life, something that's not as much of a dead end job, if that makes sense. So I looked it up, and I knew I wanted to be somewhere near the coast as well, because, at the end of the day, I'm beach bat. So, we got to be by the water. So I found the perfect conflux of those things as Stetson Law School, number one in trial advocacy, and they were right there in St. Petersburg, Florida, which I'd never heard of, to be honest. I knew generally what Tampa was, but I'd never heard of St. Petersburg. Went and visited the school. I didn't have too much trouble with the LSAT, but similar to Travis, I took it overseas a couple times. I took it 3 times to get the score that I wanted, which is something it was in my notes to talk about later. And to Travis's point, is that for any Rangers considering law school, to Travis's point earlier, timelines are much more protracted than they ever have been. You need to be planning a year, 18 months, possibly 2 years out of your matriculation date, not only for getting that LSAT score that you may want to get into the school you want, but also for those OCI requirements Travis mentioned. Is that when I classed up to Stetson in 2021, our firms and jobs, and whether it's government or small firms or big law, we're actively recruiting 1Ls the fall semester. So before we even received our first battery of grades back, they were already recruiting guys for the following summer. So it's important to know, that law school, like a lot of other professional educational requirements, the timelines are very protracted. And if you're not actively researching them, because they're different depending on the school or the regional area you're in, you can miss them. And a lot of my 1L year I spent kind of almost playing catch up because I wasn't aware of some of these timelines. I made the most of it, and I was able to, like I mentioned, get on with DOJ and the prosecutor and the public defender in turn. But for other kids, they were on the back foot, and they missed a lot of opportunities because they weren't aware of these timelines. But that goes to say, to your question about, why consider law school at all, I would say that, regardless of whether Rangers even want to practice law, or even if they don't really necessarily like the idea of being an attorney, I would still recommend law school as a path. Not just because the GI Bill can cover it or voc rehab or anything like that, but the educational benefits and just the critical thinking skills that are taught at American law schools, I think are invaluable. You'll be able to understand the not just the legal system, but its interplay with society at large. And whether or not you decide to practice, or if you do something like a JD advanced position, the knowledge you're going to gain at law school will help you navigate the world in such a more deliberate and informed manner. And what I mean by that is you can leverage your knowledge as an enormous asset, not just to you professionally, but for your family, your friends, and your community. Lawyers and, law school graduates are looked to as problem solvers and community leaders, and they're the representatives of our republic's justice system. It supplies you with the tools and the abilities to help people, basically anyone in need, just by being able to articulate these complex systems and institutions that others are not aware of or have not had the privilege to understand or study. And just by way of example, to kind of further illustrate what I'm talking about, I regularly get friends, family, coworkers, whatever, that not even seeking legal advice, they're just asking, okay, like I had an incident last week where I had a friend who had a pretty serious domestic violence incident. And without going into too much detail on that, they just wanted to know if the offender was going to be automatically released and be able to come back to the house and reoffend. And I was able to, just by drawing on my experience at Department of Justice and the prosecutor's office, kind of assuage their fears, talk them off the ledge from doing anything serious, and kind of give them a warm and fuzzy that the justice system is going to operate the way it's supposed to, and you're safe, and kind of explain to them a couple things they should mention to the judge at arraignment. But the fact of the matter is, even that conversation, not acting as an attorney, not representing them as a client, not giving them any legal advice, just my own educational background, being able to talk them through a very stressful period was it was extremely valuable. And it was valuable to me as well, because that, I think, was my why for going to law school, is I want to be of service, and I think Rangers are naturally situated to want to do that. And that's why I would continue to recommend it to Rangers as well.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of these things, and again, while it's fresh in your mind, and I'm a big proponent of, what advice do you give? The Army and the military, so many things that you can take advantage of, and then there's no better place than the Ranger Regiment, where they're gonna, if you sit down and talk to your chain of command and say, hey, I want to do this, they're probably gonna work with you to allow you to do that, But what are some things that Rangers should do while they're in? What's a good timeline to consider? And then, how did you manage all that with, uh, after you got out with school and finances and family and what other things that you wanted to do to keep yourself happy. So
Yeah, I would say that if a ranger is interested in law school, I would say do as much research as possible. First of all, try to understand the difference between, as Travis has mentioned, what litigation is, what transactional work might be, because some guys might make excellent attorneys, but they might just not want to do the courtroom thing. I would imagine that most rangers are going to want to be litigators, just because litigation is the higher stakes element. It's where it's, to me, it's the decisive operation of law. At any point, someone can do a lot of research, they can write a beautiful motion, but at the end of the day, there's got to be an attorney that can argue it in open court. And I think that is, a lot of people will articulate that the courtroom is the battlefield of the legal world. And I think it provides the same things guys are looking for in the regiment, high stakes, low margin of error, just something that at the end of the day, they're the one with the ball on the 5 yard line, and that's kind of what courtroom work is. But I would also say, Travis brought up a really important point that I think I don't want there to be any, rose-colored glasses on this. Legal work is very, very time consuming. It is a profession. It is something that, and when I say the word profession, I mean that if you're going to enter and be an attorney, a practicing attorney, you have to understand that most of your waking working hours are going to either be the practice of law or continuing legal education or mentoring other attorneys. That is going to be your full-time job. And it's like the regiment, it's naturally very demanding and it can be very isolating. And because of that high educational barrier of entry, it can be isolating for your family, your girlfriend, your wife, your children, because they may not understand why you got a call and all of a sudden you have to spend 4 more hours doing an emergency motion or something like that. So I would say it's paramount to communicate that to your family and make sure there's an understanding and there's a good support system there.
Yeah, some really good points. I think it might have been Rick, Welch again. It mentioned to me one time we were BSing, and he said, "I really didn't understand. We all sort of joked about the regiment, 110% and then some. We always sort of joked, what's the 10% and then some." Rick said, "I realized after I became an attorney for a while what that meant." So yeah, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and yeah, some really good points. And again, it's you know guys really have to understand what they're getting into, and so hopefully that's one thing the mentor network provides those guys is, and most of y'all are very, very good about telling guys, hey, this ain't easy, and it's a commitment, and it's not unlike the army in a lot of ways. You're signing a contract with yourself, but you get in this contract and you get 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road and you decide it ain't for you. Ooh, that's a lot of time you're not going to get back. But
No.
then again, of course, as you mentioned, I think the other part about that is okay, but you're not going to litigate, but the education you're going to get is going to apply to so many other things, and I know several guys. I know Travis knows several guys too that they've got their law degrees and then he went back, or in some cases, at the same time got their MBAs and they're off doing other stuff, but the things they learned at law, has made them very, very successful at doing other things. Travis, he brought up some good points, and you got anything to add or anything that you'd like to uh,
Yeah, I think I have
guys?
a couple of things that I want to riff off that Sam had just talked about. I do agree that this is it is a worthwhile consideration even if you don't want to practice law. Uh, but not to sound like the Rip Cadre, but I probably spend more time discouraging people from going to law school than encouraging because I want them to I want them to really want it if they go. And it may be wanting it for all sorts of different reasons. They may be wanting it to have that background knowledge. It may be wanting it in order to learn the Socratic method and all of the different ways that they teach us to think. It may be wanting it because you want to actually practice, but it is such a sizable investment in time. If your GI Bill doesn't cover all of the expenses, it's a huge financial suck. And so um, the thing that I hate to see is somebody who gets 2 years into law school and $180,000 in debt, and suddenly they realize, man, I really don't want to do this. Being a lawyer sucks, or this is too much commitment, or it's not what I thought it was. It's never going to be a perfect match for what you envision in your head, but you really do want to think through: is this is such a commitment? Is this something that I want to do before you give up 2, 3 years of your life and hundreds of thousands of dollars? Your average law school these days, your average public school is in excess of $50,000 a year. Your average private school is $80,000 to $100,000 a year or more. Um, that's a lot of money. And if you've already used up your GI Bill on other things, and you have to reach into your own pocket or you have to start taking out loans, that's a lot of commitment. The other thing, and this kind of touches on what Sam was talking about at the end there, um, that we've been tossing this litigation word around a little bit. Um, be careful about that. The type of litigation that I did as a commercial litigator and an intellectual property litigator was mostly not in the courtroom. It's the thing that lawyers get paid to do is to listen to people, to think about their problems, to research them, and to write. So if you don't like writing, if you don't like researching, if you don't like just taking a minute to sit down and think through stuff, if you can't shut the noise off to do that, this is a very challenging profession to jump into. Um, I cannot overemphasize the need to be willing to continually hone your writing craft. It is a skill set that I'm a former adjunct from the law school here at the UW, and I still fight with the administration over the quality of the law students that they send to me, well, to all of the firms for interviews, because the writing skills that are coming from kids that are graduating, I shouldn't call them kids, from students that are graduating are just not where they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago or even 10 years ago. So many of us now depend on emojis and shorthand and informal emails, and so the skills that it takes to write a formal demand letter, to write a motion or a brief, are challenging things for a lot of people to do. Similarly, if I have to, Sam had talked a minute ago about the different roles that an attorney has to fill, and one of them that he didn't mention is if you're in private practice, you are in a constant mode of client development and marketing. Every relationship that you have is a potential source of future business. If I go to my brother's wedding and somebody's there who needs a will or who's going through a divorce or who thinks that they have invented the next great widget and they need a patent lawyer, either I or somebody at my firm can help them with that, or I know another lawyer that I have a referral relationship with that I will recommend to that person, and then that lawyer remembers me and sends me work in the future. So you that is another skill set, and it speaks to the fact that you're never off duty. And then turning it back to the writing component, when I write for a client or when I write for a piece of advertising, for example, that's a different skill set than when I write for a court. And that skill of thinking about who is my audience and how do I want to phrase this in order to convey the information that I have in my head to that person in the most effective way possible is a very difficult and challenging thing to develop. So when you're thinking about, do I want to go to law school and is this something that I'm going to want to do afterwards, as far as practicing goes, really consider, what are the types of skills that I'm going to need? What am I good at? What do I want to learn to be good at? And what are the things that I just hate? I've got a lawyer that works for me downstairs, and I can send him into a courtroom or we do some municipal work, so he'll go sit at a county board meeting, and he is amazing in that environment. He is that duck metaphor where he is calm as can be on the surface, but beneath the water where nobody can see, his legs are kicking and his mind is constantly churning, and he always seems to come up with the right answer. But if I ask him to sit down and write a brief or a memo for me, it's terrible. And so I know that his skill set is this type of law, whereas some other associate that works for me, maybe his or her skill set is different. So think about those things when you're trying to decide what type of law you want to practice, if you want to practice. And then to Sam's point, once you figure out what you want to do as a lawyer, figure out what school is best suited in order to help you develop those skills, or give them to you if you don't have them already, or make them better if you've got to start at it. So,
Thanks, Travis.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, before we finish with the last question, Sam, any other thoughts as you prepared for this, or anything else that Travis might have said that triggered something you think guys should know?
I really just want to reemphasize Travis's point. There is, I think I've seen it pointed about the research and writing requirement. I've seen it. Some guys, some other vets have said to me that it's like being an assault librarian. And what I mean by that is that, to Travis's point, anything you're going to do in law is based off extremely detailed levels of written work. So if you don't like sitting down behind a desk, if you don't want to do a desk job, unfortunately, a lot of attorney work, you are behind a desk and you need to be researching and writing what you're doing, to exactly to Travis's point. So if you're a guy that can't sit still or can't, put out that extreme level of focus for those periods, then I would agree with Travis, and I would say that maybe it's something you want to shy away from, or you want to focus, like Travis said, on a very specific area of law. Because at the end of the day, everything we do is basically on a written document or of a written document in some way or another, and thoroughly researched. And there is a writing standard, so it's not, but it shouldn't discourage you. It's nothing that you're not going to be trained. I was lucky that Stetson is also like number two for research and writing, and we take that very seriously. But to Travis's point, there is a large discrepancy between attorneys who are excellent R&W guys and who are not, and it can affect your practice. And I think it's an important skill set that you just have to wrap your head around and understand it's part of the job. And also to Travis's point, demand letters and things like that, though that can be a lot of the job. And a lot of it can just be being able to clearly communicate with a prospective client or an opposing counsel through writing. So it's a paramount importance skill, that's for sure.
Yeah, Travis, any
Yeah, but
follow-ups? Yeah.
I sort of finished on something heavy there. On a little bit lighter note, you had asked earlier, what is it about a ranger that might make them good as an attorney? And when we were first building my current firm, I used to tell my business partner all of the time that my pipe dream was to go find a gaggle of retired sergeants major and train them how to do VA disability benefits work. Because if there's anything that I know about a sergeant major, is that he or she has made their career by learning how to not take the answer no seriously. There is always another way to tackle the problem, another person to talk to, another way to fix something. And that's really what lawyers do. And I joked to my business partner that it was sergeant's major, but that was everybody that we worked with. If you gave a ranger a problem, they're going to figure out a way to fix it. We used the tank metaphor earlier. That's what lawyers do. Nobody ever hires a lawyer because, on the litigation side, nobody ever hires a lawyer because they're happy about something. If you're hiring me, you're about to enter into probably the second biggest transaction of your entire life, right after paying the mortgage from your house or for your house. Paying a lawyer is right up there in the amount of cost. And so we're helping people out that are in very stressful situations. We live through this all day, every day, and so the fact that there's a lawsuit pending against, pending out there with my name on it is not such a big deal. But if you've never been sued before, that's scary and stressful. If you've never had to pay lawyers' fees before, you get that bill at the end of the month, and suddenly your interest in getting all of the justice available to you on the planet is less important than how do I pay for that. So uh, being able to figure out how to problem solve creatively in a way that's going to best help this client in his or her particular circumstances, you've got all the skills that you need to be able to do that as a ranger. It is a great fit for that component of the profession. So it's something to think about.
Yeah. So sort of close out this the lawyer discussion now. I think it's very important that everybody gets out of the Army, so it's never too early to reach out to us, and we'll hook you up with lawyers. And as Travis said, I got a big smile because a lot of former Rangers, they start off telling people not to be attorneys, and it's not because they don't want to be attorneys, because you all know that they'll be very successful. It's just they really got to understand the commitment they're getting into. So it's not too early to do that. It's a long road. I mean, you can mitigate some of that by taking advantage of things you can do while in the service. I mean, the Ranger Regiment is so lucky that they fund education counselors at each of battalions. They know they've got contacts. Talk to your education counselors, knock out as much of that stuff as you can, and so when you do take that LSAT, maybe you only take it once, or you understand, what you really need to do. And Sam, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody when we do this is, how did now that you've been out for a little while and you did a couple things before you do it what you're doing now, but how did you find fulfillment, success after service in the regiment? I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It's family, it's culture, it's money, it's staying in touch with people, it's hobbies, it's a whole bunch of stuff, but how do you define success? You may not think you're there yet, but what are you trying to do to balance all those things? And we, I don't think I say this and some people push back, but I don't think anybody misses the Army or misses battalion. You miss the people. And when I say the people, it's not necessarily, your close friends that you developed relationships with and you're there, but the kind of people that you're around. But Sam, how do you balance that, and what would you recommend that people? Everybody's always searching for that, and I don't think I'm 67 years old, and I think I'm pretty happy, but transition is a lifelong event. So, Sam,
Yeah, I agree with all of it, Mike. I've heard it put that, I don't miss the circus, I miss the clowns. But I agree, and I agree with your point. Like, I think it's the caliber of individual that the regiment attracts and that the military attracts. It attracts people that are always trying to find the best version of themselves. And I think that's what we miss. As former regiment guys, we miss that attitude of always bettering yourself, of always trying to not just meet but exceed the standard. And to your point, is I would say that fulfillment in my understanding is all about knowing yourself. And what I mean by that is that as we get out, we kind of have this almost identity crisis because we're no longer rangers or we're no longer in the unit. So, and that to me, and obviously to my family, that was a huge point of identity. Coming from a ranger family, everybody's tabbed, everybody's got dual scrolls and whatnot. And it's so now not having that, it's been an interesting ride. And, um, it is something that I think we're going to battle with every day of the rest of our lives is basically having that understanding and reaching that fulfillment and still kind of I guess approaching ourselves in a way where we I guess feel like we're enough, if that makes sense. Like we're worth it, even though we're not active members of the regiment anymore. We still believe in the creed. We still show up every day and we do that. We fulfill the creed. So I would say that every ranger's got to do their own internal work, reflect on their own values, what really matters to them, not what used to matter or what other people expect of you, and truly that's it. And I think of that, when you find what is fulfilling you in that way, success will follow. But that success can only be determined and defined by what is important to you, if that makes sense. And for example, for me personally, out of all the experiences I've ever had, the experiences and the moments that have meant the most to me that have stuck with me, have been the ones where I've helped or I've served someone. And I think I read the quote somewhere that you can judge the measure of a man by how many people or how many men he serves, if that makes sense. And I think again, I come from a family of public servants, and I think that is just my mission in life, to have dedicated service and serve my community in any way that I can. And that's what keeps me going. I truly believe that men men are what is a man but not a man that makes the world better. Every man should try to make the world better. And as we said in the regiment, leave it better than you found it.
yeah, thanks. That's great. Travis, you've certainly, a lot of people when they talk about, I got to find purpose, and to them that's nonprofit. I don't know very many people that have left regiment and does as much spend as much time with nonprofit and helping others as you. You've got a very successful law firm, and you know, how do you balance that? What's success for you? And again, you may not think you're there yet, but how would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was in the beginning stages of my career, it was important to develop the skill sets that the skills that were needed in order for me to be most effective for my clients. We often tell young attorneys, hey, now is the point in your career where your whole job is to be a sponge and to learn how to be a good attorney. Your client development part of it will come later. Your courtroom stuff will come later, but you need to, all of those skills we were talking about earlier, the research, the writing, the basics, kind of like the crawl, walk, run system that we use in the service. That was my goal at the beginning, part of it. And then as I got into my career, then it became more important for me to figure out, now that I've got these skills, how do I use them to improve the world around me and to help the people and the causes that are important to me. And so in 2010, I just like a lot of rangers out there, I didn't know anything about the nonprofit world, and so I just started throwing barbecues for any ranger that I could find in the Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa area. And then from there, I think USARA found me first and asked me to come in and help them. And then now it's, I think I'm on the board of 4 different organizations, and we're legal counsel for probably at least as many. And that's been great for me. On the practice side, the Veterans Disability Benefits has been rewarding, but on the personal side, being able to get involved, continue to support the ranger community, which I think is very important, has been very rewarding, and I'm just grateful. Uh, Mostly grateful that they still let me hang out. I got out as a buck sergeant. I'm a know nothing at the no, nobody in the grand scheme of things. But the fact that uh, all of these organizations are in the community in general are willing to allow me to contribute the skill set that I have developed is just I'm grateful for the opportunity, and it's very rewarding.
All right. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for your time. The preparation. I know both of you spent a lot of time preparing for this, also, not just showing up. And you both are very much involved with helping veterans and Rangers specifically. You spend a lot of time doing that, balancing everything else that you have going on. So it's guys like you that people say, well, why do you do what you do, Mike? You're retired, and you spend a lot of time. It's just like in battalion, it's working with guys like you that keep me motivated to say, yeah, it is about serving others. And if you've got issues, the best way to help yourself is to help others, I think. And that's certainly proven true to me in so many ways. And most of it's the little stuff. It's not lending someone $10,000, which I wouldn't recommend doing, because you'll never get it back, by the way. Lesson learned. But anyways. Yeah, thanks again to both of you very, very much for, again, not only your time today, and as you continue to work with Rangers, and what you do overall. Thank you very much. Rangers lead the way.